was just reminding us, we might wish to silence our phones as there will be a test of the national.
Silencing makes a difference.
Okay, we'll just
Well,
pause.
yeah.
They're all gonna go off.
We'll just pause.
Are we ready to get started? We have a quorum.
What?
All right, I'm going to call this October 4th TMC RMC or TMC meeting to order. There's a little housekeeping. I apologize for the late start. We had some logistics to work out, but just a reminder at 11:20-ish, there will be a national test of the emergency broadcast system. So just be aware we may have to pause if the room goes crazy. So Pat, will you please call the roll?
Yes. Good morning, everyone. City of Avondale, Harold Seguina. Okay. City of Buckeye, Dan Carmen, James Shano, or John Willett. Okay. City of Chandler, Ryan Peters.
Here.
City of El Mirage, Amber Wakeman. Town of Fountain Hills, Dave Trimble.
Here.
Town of Gilbert, Mary Goodman.
Here.
City of Glendale, Kevin Phelps. City of Goodyear, Wynette Reed. Or is there anyone representing the City of Goodyear today? Okay. Maricopa County, Sean Pierce.
Here.
City of Mesa, Jody Sorrell. Here. City of Peoria, Kevin Burke or Thomas Adkins. Okay. City of Phoenix, Mario Paniagua.
Here.
Town of Queen Creek, Bruce Gardner. I see him on the WebEx. City of Scottsdale, Mark Melanchenko.
Here.
City of Surprise, Eric Boyles.
Here.
City of Tempe, Rosenchowski.
Present.
Here, we're ready to proceed.
All right, thank you, Pat. If a committee member would like to ask a question or make a comment during the meeting, please type your comment in the box and it will be read out loud and answered. All meeting attendees, please mute your computer or microphone or phone. Now we're going to do agenda item 1, public comment. Public will be provided with an opportunity at this time to address the committee on non-agenda items and all action items for the joint RPT and VMR meeting agendas. up to 3 minutes, and I understand there's a request for an additional minute today, and I'll allow it. Will be provided per speaker unless the chair allows more time at my discretion. Total of 15 minutes for all speakers will be provided. So Blue, you have 4 minutes.
It says 3.
We're gonna allow 4, Pat.
Could you change it to 4? Well, it looks like I'm drinking again. I just found out from Dee Dee Barker that on the agenda at MAG this last week, where the electeds hung out, they had a thing on the agenda, the Deck Park Tunnel and all of its transit facilities, et cetera, and all of the stakeholders. You weren't there. Jessica, is there a reason that since it was for the Deck Park Transit Facility that was supposedly kind of connecting with the light rail in there, why, as a stakeholder, I would think this would be there? Let me give you a little background on that thing. On May 29th, 1986, I went to a public hearing to get funding for that was going to be using lottery funds to subjugate federal funds so that it would be strong enough to hold up the rail. And I asked Mr. Thomas, the head of Phoenix Transit at the time, where did lottery funds go? Where have they gone? And what are your future plans for them? He said, I don't know. Go ask the lottery. The meeting was specific to do that. So when I got lied to, that's where this quest came about. So when they're having a hearing on that and you guys aren't even participatory, and as you know, Mario, that study that they're looking back at again, I made that happen. Because where was the interconnectivity when there was the construction going on? I said, look, we have Sweet Acacia Station here. That's what you're calling it. Where's the connectivity with the other? Never happened. Well, then also in today's agenda, you have proposed service changes. And I see that in last month's, you had, when Jessica was speaking, that you had 21.8 million unprogrammed right now dollars. And in your service changes and such, are you doing that jurisdictional equity and taking the Queen Creek route that was supposed to be there, the Litchfield route that is supposed to be, the extensions into Litchfield, Goodyear, Avondale, and other parts of the West Valley that were on the original, this is what we're going to do, and you haven't done it. Now back to the funding and all that for the rail. I need you guys to bifurcate the agencies because, as you know, in the last document that the state had that was going to be the plan, in it, it said for rail maintenance, $1 billion. So when I see that they're going to be only getting 3.5%, and with your agenda item, what was it, on making an agreement with people to do stuff with both of the agencies, and it's for a 3-year contract where after 2 years, you don't get any funds from us or on that situation. The only funds that rail is going to be getting is for that maintenance thing that you stated you knew what the heck is going on here. But when they're putting together an agency to work and do all of these things together, blended in that, where are they getting paid? And because you're not going to be getting any money, rail, except for that maintenance, why haven't you bifurcated the agencies because of the convolution of funding? And so that my buses, you know, those that you're not doing, that 20 million that you didn't use, that you might be getting it done and adapted. And that would go for the routes that should also have been going in Chandler, Gilbert, and like I said, the one on Queen Creek would have gone through all three.
All right, thank you, sir. Next, we'll move on to Chief Executive Officer's report. Jessica Mefford-Miller will provide this report.
Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the Joint Committee. I'd like to provide you with first an update on.
Stop, okay.
Go
Sorry.
Go back one more, go forward one more, on regional ridership. Monthly ridership in the month of August across the system did rise. We typically do see an increase in ridership as the fall months begin, students return to school, and more visitors are arriving in the valley. Much of that ridership occurred on the rail system. Our rail ridership rose a little over 21% over the month of July. By the way, we are right at about 70% of pre-pandemic ridership on the rail system. We appreciate that growth. We would like it to be more. We do expect that trend to continue. We did see a 9.4% ridership drop in bus. However, I do want to footnote that and indicate we are working through fare box issues. Of course, we're dealing with antiquated equipment. We're trying to validate those fare box counts with our automated passenger counters. Those are infrared sensors mounted above the door. Fare box has historically been our system of record for bus system ridership. Automated passenger counters, by the way, are the same technology that we use on board light rail and streetcar to measure ridership. We'll continue to
Oh, they're 2 minutes early. You can silence your, or you can press it on the side.
We will, two phones, different alerts. I'm glad to see our systems work. It is so important that we have these in place. Sometimes inconvenient when we test. We will continue to keep you posted, not just on ridership, but our validation of our fare box ridership counts. Next slide, please. On a positive note, our missed miles, that little bitty bar that you see for August, significantly improved. By the way, we are experiencing about 1/10 of the missed service that we were over the fiscal year 2023. And that is thanks to a full roster of operators on the East Valley bus contract. We are still struggling with operators on our West Valley contract. It doesn't bear out as much in the numbers because West Valley is a smaller percentage of service, but we are working closely with National Express to shore up our workforce numbers, including operators and mechanics on the West Valley contract. But pleased to see that drop in missed trips. And we also saw a commensurate drop in customer complaints for the month of August, very likely due to the increased reliability of our service, which is foundational to effective operation of transit service. Next slide, please. It was a big weekend for us as we transitioned our paratransit service contract to MJM Innovations and Creative Software Solutions, who are providing the brokerage and the software and technology side of the business. MTM Transit is actually responsible for the paratransit service delivery. I want to recognize Mike Powell, our Chief Transportation Officer, and Tom Young, our Deputy Chief for Bus and Van Operations. Mike and Tom and their teams have done a tremendous job ensuring a smooth transition on this contract. This is a large undertaking. It's something we only do every several years. By Tuesday morning, just yesterday, we had transitioned from that startup phase, which just started October 1, to continuing operations. It's gone very well. I want to commend Mike and Tom and the team because even while we were launching this paratransit service transition, we're also preparing for the very large transition from Transdev to Keolis on our East Valley bus operations and maintenance contract. So a lot of change, a lot of transitions, but they are being well managed, and I expect East Valley to be successful as well. Next slide, please, Stephanie. Thank you. We celebrated a milestone in September. This is really exciting. For those of you who are unfamiliar, we have a small business financial assistance program that is sponsored by the City of Phoenix and the Phoenix Public Transportation Department. They're leveraging T2050 and the Phoenix Community Development Investment and Corporation funding to award grants to small businesses who are impacted by light rail construction. And this includes our Northwest Phase 2, as well as our South Central program. The milestone that we hit was $1 million in grant funds had been awarded by the month of September. And that includes over 180 individual grants to small businesses like the ones you see here. And the goal of this program is really to help ameliorate the impacts of construction activity on these small businesses. We want to see them be successful and continue serving their community while we're making investments in infrastructure. Next slide, please. I want to invite you all to the Fiesta on Central Avenue. This is happening on Saturday, November 18th. We conducted this event last year. This is really a celebration of the South Central community. It's a festival. There are lots of local vendors, live music, activities for the kids. You can get your bounce house on and get your face painted. It really is a nice opportunity to come together with the community. We'll be at Central Avenue and Rosa Road. It's from 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Last year, in spite of cool, rainy weather, we had a good turnout. We had dancers who did not miss a beat during the cold rain, and we look forward to that again. I hope that we'll be blessed with nicer weather and an even better turnout at Fiesta on Central. We'll share this information with you, and we would very much appreciate it if you would blast it out through your channels as well. And Mario, of course, we're working closely with City of Phoenix on Fiesta on Central. Another big event, and this will be our last update on Impact before we're actually hosting the Impact Conference on November 5th through 8th. Early registration, I think, ends this week. If you haven't registered or you need assistance with that, or if you have questions about the conference or programming, please reach out to me and our local host committee would be happy to help support you. We're very honored to host Impact. This is a big deal. It's a little bit different in terms of transit conferences because it includes spectrums of the community just beyond transit itself. There will be a lot of focus on community building and transit-oriented development. We have wonderful examples to share. We'll also be doing site tours of our facilities, including our projects that are under construction right now. So it will be a very, very exciting time, November 5th through 8th, the Impact Conference. And finally, let's do a little bit of a look ahead. We will be here tomorrow for our Audit Finance Subcommittee and October 19th for our Boards of Directors. And then we'll have our full roster of board meetings in the month of November. Last month, we did not have a board meeting in favor of conducting the board retreat. Many of you were in attendance at the board retreat. I think it was a successful event. It was so important to be able to come together with board members to focus on our strategic vision moving forward. We're taking that feedback from the board now, and we're working with Guidehouse, our strategic plan consultant, to begin identifying strategies that will allow us to achieve those goals that we've established through the strategic planning process. We anticipate coming back to the board in the month of November at our November 16th board meeting and study session on strategic plan to give them a preview of those plan strategies and get their feedback in advance of creating a final draft plan, which we anticipate taking to the board in our January cycle. That draft plan will also move through TMC, RMC, and RTAG prior to reaching the full board. That concludes my report, Mr. Chair. Any questions?
Are there any questions? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to the consent agenda presented for action. Are there any questions or are there any items that need to be pulled for separate discussion? Okay. With that, I'll request a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda items 3A through 3D.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
All right, the motion carries. Now on to item 4, proposed fare policy changes. Ms. Jessica Medford-Miller will introduce this item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to invite Ken Kessler to the podium to provide a presentation. As a matter of backdrop, when we did a fare study session last year, our board instructed us to conduct a fare study. And so we're currently in the process of conducting a fare policy study, and that will help outline future passes, programs, as well as pricing strategies that we'll adopt at a later date. The proposed fare policy changes coming before you today are tied to the fare collection modernization. Ken?
Thank you, Jessica. Mr. Chair, to mention, which really necessitates this policy. As you know, this is a regional project being collaboration by Metro. There's 4 primary goals. Project improving the customer payment experience, data collection and revenue and ridership reconciliation, as well as increasing control over our reduced fare programs, and as well leaving some flexibility to allow for longer term alternatives with the phased approach to the project, implementing a system that with open architecture will allow us to implement new features in the future as technology evolves. So just a few key project milestones that have occurred since this project began in 21. The new Valley Metro mobile app was introduced with enhanced trip planning, notifications, as well as real-time vehicle location. And then, as I think we're all aware, earlier this year, the initial phase 1 mobile fare was introduced, providing for 1 ride and 1 day mobile fares. And that's been very well received so far with the adoption of folks using that out on the system. And then we have the reduced fare application website coming up here soon, later this year. This will allow folks to apply for the reduced fares online, and providing an option to go into the mobility center and other options for applying for that reduced fare ID and reduced fare account. And then coming up in 24, we have phase 2 and phase 3 of the project that really culminates in some of the larger features. And so, what is that in 24? That's really the new stored value account-based system that we'll be introducing. So this will allow folks to have a transit account that basically allows for them to purchase stored value. So they'll load value to that account and then basically use the card or their mobile fare as they ride the system, tap or scan and go. And so that really will provide a more convenient way for folks to be able to make their fare payments. As well, we'll be introducing new fare vending machines, probably looking at mid 24 for implementing those new fare vending machines. And just to note that, we are looking at a current fare collection system that is over 15 years old, obsolete, very difficult to get parts for. So we're very much looking forward to eagerly getting the transition to the new system, new technology, new hardware, new software. And then this project will culminate with phase 3, which is the replacement of the existing fare boxes with cash-only fare boxes going forward. And in terms of the fare policy changes, we're looking for the board to approve the fare policy changes. Kind of unique. Typically, when we do fare policy changes, it's sort of implemented date certain. But due to the nature of implementing new technology, really, we're looking for the board to approve the fare changes, fare policy changes in conjunction with the launch of phase 2. There's a little bit, again, because of the technology involved in the hardware and some of the challenges we face there. It's a date kind of moving. So we're looking at early to mid 24 for the full launch of phase 2. And so that's when we look to have these updated fare policy changes in effect. So really what we're looking at is today in our fare policy, we basically have our pricing. So we have our 1 ride fare based fare. Our fare policy identifies the cost of that to the rider, as well as the various passes that we currently provide. So we'll be transitioning to this fare capping concept and what we're calling smart fare. And that will work a little differently. So we need to update the fare policy to kind of reflect how fares will work going forward. And then in addition, we're going to be introducing a requirement for a reduced fare ID or reduced fare account for users that will use reduced fares. And we want to include that in the fare policy going forward, so that as we move towards rolling out the reduced fare IDs into eligible individuals' hands here in the coming months ahead of the launch of phase 2, we have that fare policy requirement that we could point to say, okay, in the future when we launch this phase of our project, reduced fare ID or a reduced fare account will be required. It sort of will give folks a sense of urgency to, move forward with applying for that so that when we do launch phase 2, hopefully everybody who's eligible for reduced fares and wanting to use our system has that reduced fare ID or reduced fare account for using the mobile ticketing in their hands already. We want to make sure we have a smooth transition for our customers and specifically in this case, our reduced fare customers, to make sure that they've gone through the process to apply, they have their reduced fare ID or their reduced fare account available for use as soon as we launch at phase 2. And then just to note here, with this update to the fare policy, no changes to the base fare are recommended, so we're continuing with the existing base fares that we have today. And just a little bit about the fare capping concept, or what we're calling smart fare. This is thanks to Hillary and her marketing team and their great work in terms of coming up with a way to sort of have a way to identify fare capping without using the sort of transit industry kind of technical term of fare capping, something that hopefully folks will understand a little easier as far as how it works with the system and how their fare payments work. So the new card will be called the Copper Card. That will be introduced with phase 2, and basically folks will load value to their account, $20 today, $25 today, whatever amount they choose, and then they'll reach certain maximums on a daily basis, a calendar week, Monday through Sunday calendar weekly basis, as well as a calendar monthly basis. So here are those smart fare maximums, and essentially the daily, weekly, and monthly maximums we show here correlate to the current pass types that we have. So a daily pass today for local full fare is $4, $2 for reduced, and $6.50 for a rapid express, and so on and so forth for the weekly and the monthly maximums. They match the current passes, and the convenience here is folks don't have to outlay, say, that $64 for a monthly pass up front when we transition to the new system. They can pay for that over time, tap and go as they use, and then once they essentially reach 32 rides in a month, every ride after that is free. And I've touched on the reduced fare ID or reduced fare account. Basically, reduced fare ID in the short term before we launch phase 2, when we work to get those into folks' hands, it'll work just as an ID. But once we launch phase 2, that ID, the Copper Card reduced fare ID that you see there on the screen, that will actually also be their fare instrument. So they'll use that as their Copper Card. That will be tied to their account on the back end. So as they load value, they'll tap that card and go on the system as they ride. And now I'll turn it over to Dane Riles, who will talk about the public outreach process that was undertaken recently.
Before we turn it over, I do see a question online from Mr. Phelps. Kevin, would you like that answered now, or?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks, Mr. Chair. So can staff remind me regarding the updating of our actual existing fare policy regarding goals for cost recovery? If I recall right, we've been over 10 years since we've changed any of the fare policy, but I thought there may have been a group in place studying that. Can you give me an update on that?
Certainly, Mr. Chair, members of the Joint Committee. Jessica alluded to it prior to me starting my presentation. At the board's direction from the February study session, we are currently undertaking a comprehensive fare study. As part of that study, I would believe that the target for fare recovery would be adjusted or revised in that process. What we're moving forward here today is specifically for those fare policy changes that are needed as a result of the new technology that we'll be implementing in 24. But the larger overall policy, and specifically that the fare recovery target, will certainly be addressed during the fare study.
And my apologies, we were having audio problems here, so I only caught your first part of your presentation. So if that was covered in Jessica's remarks, my apologies. But thank you for the update.
Oh yeah, no problem. Yeah, and specifically the fare recovery target update was not really part of Jessica's remarks. She just mentioned the fare study more generally. So.
Okay. Well, again, I know that the recommendation is to keep it where it's at. I just, from my one advisory board meeting member, is I'm hoping that we work towards getting closer to our stated goals versus reducing our stated goals.
Understood.
All right, thank you. Please proceed.
Okay, and now I'll go ahead and turn it over to Dane.
Right, thank you, Ken, and Mr. Chair, members of the committees. I just wanted to provide a quick update on the outreach that was done regarding the proposed fare policy changes. When we go through this process, we always have a public period where we provide information to the public, an opportunity for them to provide feedback, ask questions, and make sure that they understand what the proposed changes are. So as a part of that, we did have a 30-day comment period where we had a survey and multiple outreach efforts that were done to provide that opportunity. We also did have a hybrid public meeting on August 2nd, where we gave an overview of the proposed changes and the new fare system. As you can imagine, these changes do require a little bit of background information before we talk about the changes themselves. So we provided a little education and an opportunity for people, the public, to ask questions and hear any concerns that they may have. The tactics that we used for the outreach were pretty broad. We, as I mentioned, had a survey that we did through phone, email, and intercept surveys. We also promoted that survey with in-person outreach out on the system, bus, rail, and streetcar. And then, of course, we did digital communications, social media, onboard announcements on buses and at light rail stations, and signage as well, just to make sure that we had plenty of opportunity for riders to see that we were asking for feedback and give them that opportunity to see the survey. We did have a little over 2,700 responses to the survey. As I mentioned, it was conducted over a 30-day period with assistance from West Group Research. And you can see some of the stats on the screen of what the feedback, what the audience was. But again, we were very happy to have that amount of feedback and see what our riders thought of these changes. And again, was over a 30-day period with that hybrid meeting in the middle of it. So I'm just going to quickly walk through basically the questions that were asked that directly talk about the proposed changes and the feedback that we received from our riders. The first question that we asked was related to SmartFare. As I mentioned earlier, we did take the opportunity in the survey to explain the system and how it works. And then we asked riders what was the likelihood that they themselves would benefit from this feature in the new system. And as you can see, an overwhelming majority did say that they felt they would be very likely or somewhat likely to benefit from this new feature. I will say that some of those who answered either they didn't know or they were unlikely. There was a variety of reasons. Some of those were people who are using different pass types, such as the ASU pass or school passes. And of course, with those passes continuing in the new system, there wouldn't really be a benefit for SmartFare because they're using that different method. I think the other feedback that we received from not being sure if they would benefit was from riders who maybe don't ride as frequently. As Ken described with SmartFare, you really benefit the more you ride, the more you save, is kind of how the saying goes. So if a rider isn't as frequently using the system, they would still, benefit from it when they do ride, but not necessarily to the same degree. The next question that we asked, again, isn't directly to the policy changes, but we were curious with our riders. Do you think that introducing SmartFare would be an incentive for them to ride more frequently? And again, we did have an overwhelming response saying either yes or maybe that they would ride more frequently, knowing that they have, the pay-as-you-go model where you can pay for each trip and never spend more than the daily, weekly, or monthly maximums, but not have to pay upfront as the current system is today. The next question we asked was regarding the copper card. There is a proposed $4 one-time issuance charge to get the copper card and then load value onto it for writing. So because of that, we did ask what the likelihood was of riders who took the survey to purchase the copper card. And again, very positive response, 37% very likely, 24% somewhat likely. And then the remainder, again, was a breakdown of riders who either have a different pass type, maybe they preferred a different method of payment, such as the Valley Metro app or cash. And then, of course, there are probably some riders who do prefer, again, to use a different method of payment and avoid the $4 charge, but generally had very good feedback about the card itself. And then the other question that we asked was regarding the reduced fare account requirement that Ken just covered. And the way we proposed this question was to ask riders if they are eligible for reduced fare now, or if they were to become eligible in the future, how likely are they to go through the process to get the reduced fare account, which of course will be online for most options in the future, which is a little more convenient. And again, we did have an overwhelmingly positive response with over 70% saying they were either very likely or likely to go through that process. So again, we did position it in a way to make it apply to a broader audience, just to see if that interest was there once they were eligible, either now or in the future. And then at the end of the survey, we did, more out of curiosity, see what the breakdown would be of people who took the survey and how they would prefer to pay for fare in the new system. And as you can see, there was a good mix of the mobile app and copper card and cash. And then, as I mentioned, some of the people taking the survey are using a different type of platinum pass or ASU pass. So they will, of course, continue on with those methods of payment in the future. And then 13% of riders weren't quite sure. But, generally, we did have very positive feedback on the two new methods of payment introduced with the app and the copper card. And I will turn it back over to Ken for next steps.
Thanks, Dane. So, so far we've taken this last month in September to the various working groups. And we're now bringing it here through the October board cycle for adoption of these proposed fare policy changes. So we're here today. We're going to be providing it tomorrow at AFS for information, and then we'll be going to the joint boards in later this month for approval. Oh, I think. Oh. Any questions? Oh, okay. All right. There's a recommendation. Thought I had a recommendation slide in there. So before you, here's staff's recommendation that we're looking for the joint committee's approval today. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? I see a couple online. Mr. Burke from Peoria.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Probably not so much a question, just more of a comment. This is just reiterating a point from the last time around, but I still am challenged to support the idea of what to me is capping revenues. I understand it's fare capping, but it has the effect of reducing revenue. And I think in an environment where, we're already in a challenge for cost recovery, I think I understand that there are some policy merits to it, but I think that still the overwhelming idea of trying to maximize our ability to recover costs needs to win out. And so the idea of capping revenues by capping fares is not in our best interest. So I'll be voting no for this one. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Burke, for your comment. Just a little bit of context on fare capping as a concept and a bit on fare policy and transit in general. There is an inherent tension between fare pricing and ridership. Like with many consumer products, the more we charge, the less we typically sell. And so in a transit environment, our goal is to recover a certain percentage of the operating cost through passenger fares at the fare box. We're falling short of those goals currently, as Mr. Burke and also Kevin noted a little bit earlier. And so part of that forthcoming fare policy is going to be focused on bringing in more passenger revenue, especially at this moment as we try to restore ridership as we emerge from the pandemic, trying to get more rides from our current customers, our all-purpose customers, is part of our greatest opportunity to restore ridership across the system. Fare capping will allow us, along with reliable service and effective service, to get more rides out of those current customers. There's also a really important equity component. The way our fares are currently structured, the more you can outlay at one time, for instance, if you are able to outlay the funds to purchase a monthly pass, the lower your average fare is. We know that many of our multi-purpose lower income customers are just not able to outlay that sum of money for a monthly pass today, and therefore are paying cash each ride, especially if they're using bus service and they don't have access to a ticket vending machine, if they don't begin at rail to purchase a one-day pass. So especially for those bus customers, especially for multi-purpose customers, even more so if they are low income, fare capping provides an opportunity to access mobility and for us to sell more trips to those customers. But this concept, that being said, this concept of fare box recovery and our pursuit of a higher fare box recovery remains a goal. And this is something that we're taking up through this ongoing fare policy study. So we look forward to continuing that conversation.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? I see one holding over from, I believe, Kevin Phelps. I don't know if it's left over. Yeah. You have another question, Mr. Phelps?
No, sir.
All right.
Absolutely.
Yes, Jody.
Ken, just for clarification purposes, so for the reduced fare, when you apply for your account, and if you are found to be qualified for reduced fare, like on the ADA side, you have to go get recertified for ADA. I think it's every 3 or 5 years. Do you have to reapply for your reduced fare every so many years, or is that a permanent?
Yeah, yes, if it's for individuals who are eligible as a person with a disability, there would be a recertification.
And what is that time period? Do you know?
I believe 5 years. yeah.
So, just that, I get that part, but like, so reduced fare, if you're under 18, you qualify for reduced fare, correct?
Correct.
So if I'm 16 and apply for reduced fare and find I'm qualified, I get that reduced fare qualification till I'm 21?
No, I think if I recall correctly, and this gets into the weeds and the technical aspects of the project, I think we're going to set it to flag for when the person turns 19, that the reduced fare eligibility goes away.
Okay, so I might have some more questions
Sure.
regarding the specific.
Right, and I can follow up with
Okay.
you, and we can maybe get with the project consultant who kind of knows all those technical
Okay,
details.
thanks.
Yes, Mario.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just a comment. I just wanted to express my support for this item. I think that this item brings modernization to our technology, at the same time as our fare policy and system, which is in sore need of bringing us up to date. We really simplify, I think, the system and the fare policy for our users. We bring incentives to bring more riders, as you pointed out, Jessica, and I think that has the possibility of actually bringing in more revenue and increasing our fare recovery. So I think it's something that we know it's not a straight line formula, that if we were to raise our fares, we're going to see more revenue necessarily because of that. So I'm very supportive. I think the fare capping is a good way to do it. I think it brings equity, it brings modernization, it brings simplification. So appreciate the item and the recommendations.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just one point of clarification to Ms. Sorrell's question about reduced fare eligibility for age-based, particularly for our youths. As Mr. Kessler mentioned, it will expire when you mature out of the under 18 age category. An important note about why are we doing this reduced fare ID issuance, because for some customers it will feel burdensome. Now you've got to get this permit that you didn't have to. But the situation now is that anybody can purchase a reduced fare, which is half the price of a full fare. I could walk up to a ticket vending machine or a bus fare box and choose to purchase reduced fare, though I'm not actually eligible. So this will take the ambiguity out of this, reduce fare disputes for our bus operators, which is especially important, and will reduce fare abuse of the reduced fare products, thereby increasing revenue. So that's an especially important point on that one of the 4 strategies presented today.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? All right, with that, I'll entertain a motion and a second to forward to the boards of directors authorization to amend the proposed regional fare policy as reflected in the attached document, effective upon implementation of the new account-based stored value fare collection system.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
Aye.
Just for clarification, was that last aye an aye, or was it indication?
Nay.
Sorry, it's a nay. No for Kevin Burke.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, with that, the motion carries with Kevin Burke voting no. All right, item number 5, travel expenditures and solicitations. It's presented for information only. Are there any questions? Seeing none, there's no action on this item. And then number 6, report on current events. Are there any reports on current events? If there are any agenda items for future meetings? Okay. Seeing none, with that, the next meeting of the TMC RMC is scheduled for Wednesday, November 1st, 2023 at 11 a.m. All right, now I'll convene the Transit Management Committee. You need to call roll again, Pat? Nope. Okay. The consent agenda is presented for action. Are there any items or questions that need to be addressed on these, pulled for separate discussion on the consent agenda? Seeing none, request a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda, items 1A and 1B.
Move approval.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Are there any opposed? Hearing none, motion carries unanimously. Proposed agenda item number 2, proposed April 2024 service changes. They're presented for information. Are there any questions for staff? If not, we'll move on to number 3, a report on current events and suggested future agenda items. Are there any reports or suggested future agenda items? Hearing and seeing none, the next meeting is Wednesday, November 1st, 2023 at 11 a.m. And with that, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
So with that, I will convene the meeting of the Rail Management Committee for the October meeting. And we have a super long agenda for this one. We exceed 2 minutes, I'll be surprised. So what we have on the agenda is the consent agenda. And I have a note for item 1C, that 1C will be updated for the board action to reflect that non-revenue vehicles will be purchased from Sanderson Ford and Peoria Ford. Are there any questions or items that need to be pulled from the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, I'd request a motion and a second to approve the consent items 1A through 1C.
I'll make a motion.
Second. Got a motion and a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Nay. All right, passes unanimously. Any updates or current events that anyone wants to share? Seeing none, just an announcement that our next meeting is Wednesday, November 1st at 11 a.m. Thanks, everybody. This meeting's adjourned.
Great job.
Thank you.
Thank you.